I think right now too, because there's such a animosity between the left and the right, it does kind of feel like anything that you do and you force through on the executive order side, it's gonna just potentially be insulted, flamed, shot down should the boot change foots, down the road. So, like, ideally, what I would love to see from this administration is finding ways to actually get this to become nonpartisan. And like, if everyone's on board with this idea, it probably has more staying power. Otherwise, this is like a 4-year pump and dump, maybe 8 if we can get, JD Vance and his cute little face all over the next ride, or whoever it is that steps up to wear the belt. But yeah, I mean, like, this does seem kind of like they've got a lot of work to do before we see like real government bags being moved around into the orange coin.
Welcome back to Bitcoin.com's Token Narratives, where we discuss the biggest stories shaping the Bitcoin and cryptoverse. My name is Graham Stone, Bitcoin.com marketing operations lead and high priest of the Temple of Hopium. Joining us this week are news and research gigabrain David Sensel, chief scientist Andrei Terentiev, and Grand Poobah Corbin Fraser. We got an exciting show here for you today because hours ago, the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve Executive Order was signed by Donald Trump, establishing a Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. It will take the form of the Bitcoin already seized, but it seems there will be no taxpayer funding of buying of Bitcoin, taxpayer funded buying of Bitcoin. So I'm just reading a quote here from David Sachs, the crypto czar. It says, the secretaries of Treasury and Commerce are authorized to develop budget-neutral strategies for acquiring additional Bitcoin, provided those strategies have no incremental cost on American taxpayers. So it does seem that there is a path to acquiring more Bitcoin as long as it's somehow budget neutral. In addition to the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve, there is the executive order also establishes a U.S. digital asset stockpile consisting of digital assets other than Bitcoin forfeited in criminal or civil proceedings. So there's two separate things in the executive order: a Bitcoin Strategic Reserve and a stockpile. The stockpile is for all the other coins, and the government will likely not actively be looking for ways to get more assets in the stockpile. I don't really know, but let's dive into this. Just one thing to note here is that on the announcement of this executive order, the price of Bitcoin immediately fell, started dumping. Presumably because it has now been confirmed that the reserve will likely not result in net purchasing of Bitcoin, at least in the near term. So I'd like to get everyone's take on this. Maybe my question is this immediate dump in the price of Bitcoin, is that just a gut reaction dump? Will the market ultimately converge on this being bullish? Thoughts, gentlemen?
Yeah, I think putting to bed this idea that they're going to go out into the market and buy Bitcoin, at least, yeah, like you said, in the near term, is probably causing this. I also think, though, that the macro picture right now is not the happiest. Right, we had volatility in traditional markets So that's also probably not helping the situation. So I think that between those two things, it kind of explains most of the move. At least that's what I think.
It's a pretty small dump overall, though. Like, it's only, what, 2K? And it's, like, kind of bouncing back a little bit right now anyways. So it doesn't seem like that bad. But I generally agree. It's kind of like, well, I was hoping they would buy my bags, so now I'm going to sell because they said they're not going to do that. But I think long term bullish, right? Now that we at least know they're not going to be able to sell. The interesting thing about the executive order is that like executive orders can basically always be overturned, right? So the hilarious thing is like, is there just going to be this perpetual debate? Like if the next Democrat comes in and be like, I need to sell the government's Bitcoin, and everyone's like, no, you can't sell it. But I feel like that's just going to be like a never-ending battle on like, can we sell the Bitcoin or not?
Can you guys explain to me what was the ultimate like hopium play here? Like, were people thinking that the Fed was just going to suddenly start buying Bitcoin? Is that what they assumed? That they were just going to magically be like, I guess we'll listen to Trump?
Yeah, I think there was the biggest dream was like something like the Loomis bill, right? Where Congress would pass something where and what it was in something it's saying like over the next 5 years they were going to buy some ungodly amount of Bitcoin per year. I find that hard to believe. The kind of more realistic hopium was some kind of like financial jiggering where what was it through the Treasury's like stabilization fund or something like that. They could the Treasury could go out and purchase Bitcoin, ostensibly under this idea of using it to stabilize like the dollar market. And so they've done that before with like gold and stuff. And I think that's what people were kind of hoping that Trump would do, that he could do that unilaterally. But again, it was probably unlikely to begin with.
So are we saying then for certain that Cynthia Loomis's bill is off the table? Like, or is this just like perhaps a stepping stone to that?
No, I think it's potentially still on the table. Like the thing about like, I mean, why Trump can't just be smashing market buy on Bitcoin is like they actually need Congress to like allocate the budget for that, unless like what David was talking about, they do some like weird finagling, which I think they've left the door open for that, which is they talk about the budget neutral. It's like, what does that actually mean? They're just gonna say, you know what, why don't we just buy Bitcoin instead of this budget? But I think like that's very unlikely. But I think the bill could still pass. I think like Graham, you were talking about the Texas bill that passed. So I think that one actually does allow for like net purchases of Bitcoin with like government revenues. I just briefly like tried to summarize that. So maybe you see like states doing that, and then maybe you do have an eventual congressional bill that says, okay, we're going to do this with actual budget for buying BTC or whatever.
Someone in the chat just said, the BTC Bard said they don't need to allocate to the budget if they just choose to sell gold from our gold reserves.
If we still have them.
If they're still there, I guess that's you gotta check to make sure the gold's there and then decide are we gonna sell those things and get some more digital gold? Yeah.
But I would like to say though that I think kind of what Andre was saying a little earlier though, which is the Loomis bill or something like it, something that goes through Congress is kind of the preferred way, because then it can't be just kind of overturned by the next administration that comes in. The downside though is I think right now it would be a hard ask, even with what's it called, one party controlling Congress, to pass something like this, right? Where we're going to go, where the government's going to go out and buy crypto. I think that still wouldn't pass right now, especially with like the government laying off all these workers and all this kind of stuff. I don't know. I find that unlikely.
See, they need to pass the bill that when they get a budget surplus, it's going straight into BTC. this is the only way, and people will be cheering on all the budget cuts and things like that.
Well, I think right now too, because there's such a animosity between the left and the right, it does kind of feel like anything that you do and you force through on the executive order side, it's gonna just potentially be insulted, flamed, shot down should the boot change foots, down the road. So, like, ideally, what I would love to see from this administration is finding ways to actually get this to become nonpartisan. And like, if everyone's on board with this idea, it probably has more staying power. Otherwise, this is like a 4-year pump and dump, maybe 8 if we can get, JD Vance and his cute little face all over the next ride, or whoever it is that steps up to wear the belt. But yeah, I mean, like, this does seem kind of like they've got a lot of work to do before we see like real government bags being moved around into the orange coin. Like, I mean, the only other thing that could potentially speed this up is if China moves quicker, which we have seen. Like, they do have the benefit of being able to just, uni party, we're doing this now, and then they just do things. And they don't really have to deal with, debate and democracy, and you can just unalive people or like disappear people. And then you're like, all right, we're just doing this, guys, So, I mean, maybe some more pressure from external countries with sufficient interest could kind of force things to move a little quicker. But yeah,
I think BTC Barbara would be foolish to overturn an executive order like this, which I totally agree. Like, just imagine how unpopular, because basically if you're overturning this executive order, you're going to say, we're going to dump on you. And there's like, like 50%, I don't know what the exact numbers these days are, of like 50% of people hold crypto. Imagine being the president, like, yeah, we're going to be dumping our bags on you guys.
I think the Dems would love to do that. I think they would. I think they would love to zero out the market. And they would probably do it in the worst way possible, as in like there's some kind of exogenous crypto event like FTX or something, right? And they pick just like that perfect time to, now we're going to market sell 100 billion in Bitcoin. Good luck. So I would like an act of Congress for sure.
So maybe in terms of Congress, who are the current champions that are potentially going to run this through to the end zone, or is that still to be determined?
Well, can I ask you a question? Like, we've talked about this before. The most what's it called? The bill with the most attention is the Loomis bill. I personally think it's kind of a bad bill overall. I just think that the dynamics of it are underwhelming, right? Like stating to the market that you're going to go out over the next 5 years and spend X amount of money every year to buy something allows everybody in the world, China, our allies, other businesses, to front run the government. I just don't. I don't know. That seems really stupid to me.
Just like a big bang. Okay, we're just gonna market buy $1 billion or whatever.
No, I mean, I think I would like to see some kind of more, I guess, thought put into it. Like, for example, the what's it called? The Strategic Petroleum Reserve. I mean, you have to hand it to not Biden, but his admin and the people that were running that. They did a good job of purchasing it when oil was low again, right? And so you would want some stuff like that. Like, we'll buy it when it's under a certain amount, like when it's under the 200-day moving average, or whatever, something like that. So it's less likely to be front run.
People hate this idea, but you got to give the power to the Fed. to let them move it around, print money, buy
Let
BTC.
them do their little manipulating games that they do, right?
Yeah. And they'd be the perfect people to actually be in charge of that. If you're gonna like, I don't know, try and make like smart buys or something like that, or help the government make smart buys, it has to be the Fed. Like, right?
I think the problem with that though is that I suspect the Fed, being an independent organization, is probably filled with a lot of the stuff that Doge is trying to remove. There's a lot of probably woke DEI, inefficiencies there that are costing, I don't know, let's just say like the opportunity. And yeah, I mean, like maybe if I mean, you guys saw that Massey's got he brought back the End the Fed bill, so that could be some discussion there. I don't think that's ever happening, but I like that there's people kind of poking the bear.
Yo, who's eating potato chips on the live stream?
That's me. Sorry about that.
What kind of chips you got there, big guy?
It's not a chip. It was a wrapper. I was taking a wrapper off of my drink, so you couldn't see what I'm drinking.
You don't want those Coca-Cola sponsorships?
That's right.
Can we dwell for a moment on this idea of a purchasing for the reserve with in a budget neutral way? Because I've just got this tweet here from David Bailey. He says 39 billion of surplus ESF, 160 billion from selling SDRs, 800 billion from gold certificate revaluation equals $1 trillion budget neutral Bitcoin buys. Is anything like that anywhere remotely realistic?
I mean, I think for sure, like, right, this is kind of what we talked about. The government has a lot of assets in general. Whether they can just sell, I don't know, a building and convert and say, okay, we want that paid in Bitcoin, right? Like another way of thinking that, can they accept Bitcoin as payments for stuff? Where like you sell this lease or whatever, they're selling a bunch of buildings now. Instead of accepting USD, we are willing to accept Bitcoin for that. When we sell military equipment to Ukraine, they can buy Bitcoin. They can buy it with Bitcoin. So I think that, I don't know specifically like which acronyms and what he's talking about, but there's a budget neutral way could just mean payments, right? Can payments be accepted in Bitcoin instead of US dollar? That could be interesting.
I've been thinking that there probably should be some other, like, in the event that, say, the government were to begin, say, accepting Bitcoin we've seen this in certain states where they're like, yeah, we'll take Bitcoin, you can pay your taxes in Bitcoin. We've seen that in some countries and some states. I think have opened up some discussions around that. But I think what would be interesting is if they also let people pay with altcoins. And then as long as there was like you can take whatever alt, you're just going to have to market sell into Bitcoin. And then it just becomes kind of this vacuum of liquidity from the alt markets back into this Bitcoin reserve. But I mean, like if the long-term play is we want this digital gold asset and we support these altcoins because we were kind of building up some treasury and some, say, qualified digital assets, and maybe it's like, all right, as long as we're growing this general stockpile, ideally weighted more towards Orange Coin because we see that maybe it's got more longevity, more history, maybe even more future upside, let's say. I kind of feel like there's probably ways they can still grow this thing without necessarily spending. It's more just like accepting or something like that.
Everybody in the chat is saying sell gold. This is the final haymaker for Peter Schiff. If the government is selling off its gold reserves for BTC.
Could you imagine that? That'd be wild. Yeah, I mean, the language of this leaves open the idea that they can, they could swap assets that the Treasury has under its control, right? Like what I was saying earlier with the stabilization fund. Presumably, they have a bunch of stuff in that gold and I think other fiat things of that nature. So the language is kind of open enough.
Can we go into what the same executive order talked about digital assets? What, like, did they mention at all what coins they're also looking at? What projects? Is this like American-made projects or just like whatever we've been shilled at the White House?
It's scant on details, but I think the thing is there's two separate parts, right? It's the strategic reserve and the stockpile, and the stockpile would have the digital assets. Presumably, it's the ones that Trump tweeted out on Sunday.
Cardano,
XRP, Ripple, yeah,
Solana,
which that was sort of universally hated.
Is it known how much they have? Because if you're saying that this is also coming from like hacks and DOJ actions and stuff, like, is there any stats on how much they actually have right now in non-Bitcoin?
No,
I don't think any of that's disclosed. You know what I would do if I was like Garlinghouse XRP or Hodgkinson's from Cardano, I would donate some percent to the stockpile to get it started. I think that would be one of the best moves to make. You know, they're sitting on so much, so much of the supply of XRP and ADA, and I think that would make a good headline for Trump, who, you know, he loves that kind of stuff, and it could help like legitimize that kind of thing. I don't know if they will, but I think I wouldn't be surprised if they do, because that to me seems like a smart play.
Does anyone here think that a digital asset stockpile containing things other than Bitcoin is a good idea?
Stockpile, yeah. Reserve, no. Right? So a stockpile doesn't mean that you're not gonna use it for whatever you want in the future. A reserve is supposed to be used for like what, you know, you're supposed to gather it and grow it and use it strategically in emergencies, right? Isn't that like the technical difference there? Whereas a stockpile is just like, oh, let's just get a bunch of stuff and we'll use it whenever we want.
I mean, you could take the utility first narrative would be like, okay, let's just assume that in the next 10 years, more things are going to benefit from a decentralized blockchain technology or smart contracts. And then perhaps, yeah, having a stockpile of Solana and Ethereum does support the utility case for, I don't know, moving more government nonsense on chain and provably verifiable and auditable. And in that case, yeah, you need assets to be able to maintain those smart contracts and maintain liquidity in certain areas. Sure. So I guess part of me thinks that, yeah, it's not the worst thing. I do think it softens the message a lot. And I think that's where it opens up a lot of debate from the opposition, where they can then say, wow, who's benefiting from this the most? You know, because we know that XRP is not totally like Bitcoin.
All right, Corbin, you're kind of in and out on the signal right now.
Well, I think the stockpile can also be very similar to the sovereign wealth fund, right? Which is another executive order that they made, where, you know, they can just be buying, selling, trading, doing whatever, trying to acquire assets by whatever means necessary. And I totally agree with David that these guys that are really big should just donate. I mean, this is like the perfect marketing. There is no better marketing budget, I feel like, than
the government airdrop.
The government airdrop. And it kind of just fits really well into the whole, like, I don't know, regulatory capture narrative or like whatever, where like XRP has the government stamp of approval. So now they can start showing not only are the banks accepting it, the government is.
Exactly.
Like, what are they doing with it? Nothing, but, you know.
Well, I guess this is like a question I'd love for you guys. You guys probably all you've been through the weeds of, hey, the utility, crypto needs utility. And Bitcoin right now, beyond storage of value, can't really use it for smart contracting, can't really use it for much. Say scoring I don't want to call it a strategic reserve, but an allocation of Sol or XRP or Ethereum. What could the government do with that from a utility standpoint? Like, what needs to be on chain? What needs to use decentralized blockchain technology in order to, like, say, support the government or make it more efficient?
I mean, I think some level of transparent payments is a good thing, if especially for like government and auditing purposes. I don't know if they're ever going to like be willing to actually do that. That's I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago. Like that to me is the number one use case of like the smart contract layer. It's now, um, they even see with all this Doge stuff, you see all these payments going out, and people, what is this? Right? If it's like all on the blockchain, it becomes so much easier to analyze for like all these like data nerds.
But let's say you do that. The government starts doing things on chain and like on Solana or whatever. I mean, they're still only going to need like what, $5 in Sol to like make their transactions go through. Like, do they need like billions of dollars of Sol in the stockpile to make this thing work?
Well, I mean,
I don't get it.
The great thing about like a stockpile of, for example, for Sol in particular is, and this was debated online this past week from kind of Solana luminaries. Let's say that they get they have a bunch of Sol, or they maybe have an initial investment. They can stake that immediately, right? They can stake that immediately, and it'll start to grow, right? They get yield on it. So not a bad not a bad situation.
You could also go down the path of stablecoins on these different chains, right? Like that still is the most useful, probably real world asset across, say, Ethereum and Solana. And maybe if you are paying out, hundreds of millions of dollars to LGBT Africa nations or something like that, you might want to do that in stable coins, because at least then, there is some auditability. It's on chain. We can see how it was misappropriated or how it was used to support, more transgender surgeries in, third world countries or something like that.
Transgender mice.
They're making the mice trans.
Oh, that speech.
Okay,
Loved it.
I think I think we should focus for a minute on this Texas bill, because this actually does seem quite historic in, possibly at the same level as the executive order. So just to recap, something like half of the US states have some form of legislation in the works towards making Bitcoin part of a strategic reserve at the state level. But the first 5 states to actually vote on it they've all rejected it. So that included Wyoming, which has traditionally been seen as like the most friendly state to the idea of Bitcoin. However, just a few hours ago or half a day ago, it seems like the Senate in Texas has voted to pass a Bitcoin strategic reserve bill. It's Bill SB 21, and it was passed in a 25-5 vote on March 6th, so today in the US. There was, let me just get a few more details about this. So the bill would actually allow the state to invest some of the public's money into digital assets, specifically Bitcoin. It doesn't appropriate any money right off the start. It creates an account under the Office of the Comptroller, who'd be responsible for managing the asset. And then it would be up to lawmakers through the appropriations process to supply the account. And at the committee hearing on the bill, Schwertner, who's the guy who introduced the bill, said he's pursuing a $16 million rider to the Senate budget proposal as an initial funding for this. And I should note that this bill isn't law yet. It's been passed by the Senate. Correct me if I'm wrong, Andre, you're in Texas. I don't know exactly how this works, but I think there still has to be another vote by the legislature, and then it has to get signed by the governor. But it does seem likely that this is going to be the first Bitcoin reserve bill at the state level.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. So there is like one more, I guess it's like the equivalent of the House or whatever, that it needs to go through and then signed by the governor. But it seems like you said it's going to happen. And I think with all this stuff, I think like all these states and like Trump is really like that sovereign wealth funds are a really freaking good idea. like, so there's like for all of them, like the Saudis, Emirates, for like all these things, right? If the government can like collect a bunch of assets, it gives them so much power to actually like do stuff instead of just, hey, how about we raise taxes again? So I think this is kind of like the origin of like these like Bitcoin funds. Is the government trying to get hard assets, and as a means to like avoid taxation, more taxation, and really like spread their influence. But yeah, so I think it's going to be huge.
It's also a good sign.
I was just going to say, I think it would be very cool if we could get the government to accept tariff payments in Bitcoin, but that might be a little bit of a stretch.
Yeah, it could work, especially with international crypto companies. I just think also though for Texas, it's a good sign. It's a show of goodwill that they're pro crypto, and they are kind of one of the leading states in America for crypto. So yeah, it shows that the local government is kind of aligned with crypto companies. So in that way, it's good marketing for the state.
For this is like a perfect. Going back to sorry. Go ahead, Aaron.
Exactly. I think you're going to say the same thing. Like you're saying that this is that sovereign wealth funds are a way that governments can pay for things besides just raising taxes, and that's why I brought this up. Bhutan. We had this story from Jamie Redmond. Bhutan, as many will know, has been mining Bitcoin for the last several, using their hydro resources. Apparently, they've accumulated around 10,000 Bitcoin, which is more than El Salvador's 6,000 Bitcoin for comparison. And in this story, it's noted that what they've actually been using the reserves for from time to time is to fund things in the government, paying for wages when their US dollar reserves were dangerously low. So at their discretionary fiscal spending of the Bitcoin reserves, yet they're also just like accumulating it, and it's growing, and they're going to use it when they need it. So I think that
I think like
illustrates
the general
point, Andre.
Yeah, zeitgeist, is finally turning to like this is becoming a more mainstream opinion where, hey, wait a second, taxation kind of is bullshit. Right, like so I think you see this in like Florida with like, well, in the US and specifically they have like property taxes where it's just like if you own your house you just have to pay X% a year for whatever reason. Like what is the government actually doing?
My roads.
Right? So like things like income tax too is like it was supposed to be funding like a very specific thing, which is like all these like security social security programs, and then at one point I was like, why don't we just do something else with it, right? And just keep taxing. So I think like the zeitgeist is now trying to turn towards like, why don't you guys make your own money in some way and use that money?
Well, this is also this is why I'm very much pro Canada 51, and I've not been shy on that. But I mean, yeah, it's like you look at like capital inefficiencies, right? You've got this Canadian democracy that's running this like really silly, UK version of parliamentary democracy, which is just complete garbage. It's just a terrible system, highly inefficient. The government of Canada hasn't even been like doing anything for the last 6 months. They're just like prorogued, and it's chaos. But they're all drawing a salary. They're all getting paid. All these like bureaucrats are getting paid. So you got a big chunk of the country just doing nothing but getting paid, highly inefficient. right? And then you've got the exact same, or arguably a better system in the US, also with bureaucrats getting paid. You could just not have that. If they were together, you've got some capital efficiency where the government is kind of, there's smaller. It's supporting a bigger, say, nation, and it's supporting more economic resources. And then, if you look at Bhutan, right, they've got hydro. The one thing that Canada has in abundance is a shit ton of hydro. Like, it's still one of the only affordable places to mine Bitcoin is in that like northeast Quebec corridor, where there's just leagues and leagues of gigajoules of untapped hydro there. So like, if the US, and we've heard Trump say, we're gonna mine American Bitcoin, make America first Bitcoin, great. You got to find some affordable ways to do that. Either that's nuclear or that's hydro. And I think you're going to have a hard time getting more nuclear built just due to NIMBYism. And like, nobody wants that whole not in my backyard, and I don't want the nuclear here. Hydro, everyone can get behind. So you got to get more hydro. So you got to get Canada, and you got to convince those French people that, hey, we're going to make your life better, lower taxes, and I think this is like, it's going to be the most difficult play for them. Much easier to score Greenland. But if you can get Canada, it wouldn't take much. Canadians are broke. They're just miserable Canadians right now. Like, nobody has money. Everything's expensive.
They're too proud though, Corbin.
Yeah, I think that like, there's not enough of a zeitgeist in Canada to like swallow this pill. But I think the way that you could America pill Canadians is to highlight that you preserve your silly culture of hockey and maple syrup. You get lower or much cheaper taxes, and you do a 1-to-1 swap. Get rid of that Canadian loonie, do a 1-to-1 US dollar swap, immediate like 30% upside for every Canadian. And you do that, and you could even do it over like, you could bake in some vesting terms for the US dollar where, some Americans might feel butthurt that Canadians are instantly getting like this 30% bump. But you're like, it's vested over 5-10 years or something like that. You still get it. You're getting more. It's just like, you got to be invested. We got to see this thing through, make sure Canada doesn't like screw this up. But yeah,
you'd have to find a way to let them still call themselves Canadians though, because that's like the entire national identity.
Californians, right?
Texans
call
right?
themselves Texans. You can let Canadians be Canadians or Albertans be Albertans.
Exactly.
It's just, but yeah, I mean, like, I've talked to like family and friends back home, and there's a lot of, dude, like, Canadians are so tapped into the friggin' matrix. They're just like all in on this, like, right now they're removing American products from shelves to try to like stick it to the man. It's like,
I saw that.
You've already bought it. It's already
Yeah,
in
no,
your
My mom was telling me about boycotting Walmart.
Hilarious. One last thing on this whole like Bhutan or even Canada or other countries using their resources to kind of mine Bitcoin. The other thing that this does is it gives them a new way to access dollars. And I know a lot of people in crypto, they like to think that the dollar is dog shit. It's far from it. Everybody in the world wants dollars a lot. They don't have enough of them. And so any way to get access to fresh dollars is a massive win. And especially for a small country like Bhutan, I'm sure that they're dollar starved. And so it makes a lot of sense for lots of these smaller countries to do this because, there's not enough dollars to go around.
Yeah, and this is exactly what's mentioned in the article written by Jamie as well. They drew down on their Bitcoin strategic reserve when their US dollar reserves were dangerously low.
And why do they need dollars? Why does everyone in the world need dollars? Because all their debts to other people, not to the US, is denominated in dollars. So when Bhutan needs to pay China or whomever, it's going to be in dollars. It's not going to be in some bum ass shit tier coin
like a loonie. You guys don't
currency.
Want loonies?
Yeah, no.
Loonies are great.
It's not going to be
Canadian backed.
No, it's going to be in the dollar, baby. So there. All right, get off that.
All right. one more Bitcoin related topic here before we move on to some other things is I'd like to just bring up El Salvador once again, because some details emerged about the IMF's deal with El Salvador. And the details that emerged were that it states specifically in the document that El Salvador can't use public funds to buy Bitcoin. Yet we have Nayib Bukele on Twitter a few days ago saying, oh, this all stops in April. This all stops in June. This all stops in December. No, it's not stopping. If it didn't stop when the world ostracized us and most Bitcoiners abandoned us, it won't stop now and it won't stop in the future. And then he posts a picture of their Bitcoin account going up. He bought more Bitcoin. So I find this really interesting. Like,
well, what are the hypotheses
signing a deal
here?
with the IMF?
Like, is it either he's doing this in defiance or he's got some sort of agreement with the IMF that he's still going to do it?
Wait, but so can you clarify for me, Graham? So El Salvador basically owes money to the IMF?
They just took out like a $1.5 billion line of credit from the IMF, and the IMF loves to put stipulations when they give out these loans, right? And one of the stipulations was stop promoting Bitcoin. So El Salvador rolled back its Bitcoin law, but there was a lot of question about whether or not El Salvador would continue buying Bitcoin, and it actually states in the documents from the IMF that they're not supposed to. Yet Bukele seems to be continuing with that.
Does it say that they're not allowed to buy Bitcoin at all, or that they're not allowed to use this money to buy Bitcoin?
They're not allowed to use public funds. Not that. I mean, the actual loan money, like, that'd be amazing if they were using that to buy the Bitcoin. But
is that legal? Can the IMF can the IMF like unilaterally, like, by the way, we can, part of the loan agreement is on your government?
That's the whole thing that the IMF does, right? So they dangle this like low interest. I don't even know if it is low interest, but they dangle money in front of you, and in order for you to sign the deal, they make you give over water rights, whatever, do all kinds of things, right?
Water rights,
historically, they've done a lot.
Water rights makes sense to me, things of that nature, because you're talking about like public contracts, but something as broad as like, hey, this is what you can spend public money on. That's so vague. I don't know. It just seems like a weird overreach.
Well,
like, legally.
I mean, whatever
speaking.
it is that Bukele seems to have found a way around it, which I kind of respect. He's like,
yeah,
we're just doing it. So either it's defiance, or it's they've come up with a creative scheme, or there's some sort of additional agreement outside of what we've seen in this document that allows them to continue doing something. Maybe they're spending tariff money. Maybe it's not considered public money if they're using XYZ to accumulate more. Who knows? Or it's just pure Chad defiance of like, we're taking your money and we're buying more Bitcoin, which I think would be
cancel my loan. I dare you.
Yeah, it's like, what are you going to do? Come into my country and like take the money back, or like, block our banks? I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on. So, David, you had this topic.
Yeah, I just have a grab bag of things.
Okay.
Let me bring this up.
We can move through these fairly quickly. Just some of them, I'm just curious to hear your guys' take on them.
Okay. From DeFi Ignis, Bybit asked to return 44.67 ETH from the Paraswap DAO that Bybit hacker paid in swap fees. This decision has ethical and legal responsibilities against the DAO and sets a precedent for the wider DeFi ecosystem, notably ThorSwap. I'm a Paraswap DAO delegate, but split on how to vote. On the one hand, DAO profiting from a hack is bad optics. Returning it shows support. for another industry player against a sanctioned state actor. And he goes on, but I'm worried about setting precedents for DeFi. Code is law. The DAO earned the fees legitimately via smart contracts. So basically, it's that's the split here. It's back to the code is law debate versus the ethics, the moral implications of profiting by this North Korean hacking situation. Is that it?
Yeah, basically. I'd just like to hear you guys' thoughts where you land on this, because it isn't. I think it isn't like cut and dry, right? Like you could imagine DeFi and crypto companies wanting to support each other as they did for the Bybit hack. But how far does this go, and at what point do you draw the line?
Yeah, if my opinion is the crypto space should do everything it can to stop North Korea, because it's a very bad look if North Korea is getting away with these massive hacks and laundering this money.
Well, this is
Does
where
it extend all the way to fees earned on swaps, though? You would say yes?
Yeah, I'd say so.
I mean, I think ideally this is where DAOs should. I mean, right now, so many DAOs are just managed by like snapshot voting and governance, and it's still like there's still a dude at the end of the multi-sig that has to sign the transaction, or a group of dudes that are signing these transactions. Like, I think if the DAO is a little bit more, I don't know, actually, like if the DAO treasury is baked into smart contracts, then it starts looking a little bit more like you. In theory, if you had a smart contract that just said, like, we don't pay out, we only pay, like the only way this stuff gets paid out is when it's, I don't know, returned to like owners of this token or paid in fees or airdrops or whatever it is. But yeah, I mean, if there's a treasury account that's managed by a few multi-sigs and the governance votes on this, then it probably does stand to reason that they should just follow through with like what people vote towards and do kind of the right thing here. Maybe I think there were some proposals or discussions on this on like maybe charging like a 10% tax or like, give us something from this, but it's sort of like, sure, I guess this is your money.
I think like I don't agree with giving it back to Bybit. Like that doesn't make any sense to me at all. Like that there's like some ethical obligation to give it to that Bybit. I do think there probably is some like ethical obligation. Like if I knowingly was a participant in fraud or like whatever you want to call it, and I made money off it, there probably is some ethical obligation to like burn the funds or like do something, where it's like, the last thing you want in crypto is like, all right, yep, we know the joke, crime season is legal, but like everyone's just like, yeah, as much crime as possible so I can get my slice of the meat or whatever. So I feel like burning it is like a happy middle ground. Like I don't get returning it to Bybit at all.
What I'd really love to see is, given we know that now Trump and the administration is holding ETH and these assets, at what point do these hacks from North Korea become like national security incidents where Trump goes to knock on the door of Kim Jong-un and says, "Yo, Rocket Man, your boys took all the money. We need that back. Put it back in or we're coming in." I mean, like, to me, at some point, you're going to end up having to talk your bag. And if you're supporting these ecosystems and you know that this is genuine theft, it's sort of like you got the biggest army. You could be throwing that around to say, you got, like the U.S. is doing this already with fentanyl, right? They're doing this with fentanyl in Mexico and Canada. They're like, hey, boys, we're tariffing you until you clean up your act.
Settle down. And
then it's like, let's close down the fentanyl supply lines to save Americans. There's not a big stretch from, hey, North Korea, you're robbing all the crypto. We got bags here. You're hurting U.S. investors. Stop it.
This guy said donate to the digital asset stockpile. All crime fees go straight to the digital asset stockpile.
That would be awesome. You could have some back channel dealings where literally, you could have someone from the Trump admin go over and be like, "Hey, look, guys, we get what you're doing, but it's getting a little out of hand. Keep it down. Give us 500. Let's give us half the ETH. We won't send cruise missiles to you, but just
Well,
too big.
it does at least become a negotiating tool, right? Even if the goal isn't to just get the crypto, it's like you did something. You did our U.S. investors dirty, and now there's concessions that need to be made. So maybe stop.
My guess though is when I first heard that it was Bybit and they're kind of like a Chinese exchange, I bet you money that the Chinese government did reach out to North Korea and be like, "Hey, what are you doing? What are you doing?" I really do think that there was kind of like maybe not threats or anything like that, but like why a Chinese exchange? What are you guys doing? No.
I guess question here would be how much of Bybit does China own? Like not individuals, but like the government, because we know that they tend to have positions in these private enterprises, and there's like you often see the Chinese exchange owners suddenly just disappear, go to jail for a while. That we've seen
also,
this time and time again.
China is North Korea's biggest benefactor, right? They're their biggest protector, and China, like most Asian countries, there's a whole thing about saving face. So you have this like marquee Chinese crypto exchange get hosed by North Korea. It's just a bad look, right? It'd be like if Mexico did that to an American company. America would be like, whoa, hey.
Well, you could also take the tinfoil hat theory and say, well, maybe there was already some kickbacks. Maybe all of this laundered money was already saying, hey, we'll cut you guys in on this juicy deal. So like, if this is how you get your dividends out of Bybit,
I mean, they did handle it really well. So they had like strategized out their response. Spicy.
All right, let's switch it up. One more topic here before we end on a fun one, which is let's dive into the liquidity picture, the macro picture for a minute here. So I think there's a few notable things that have happened recently on the macro front, which is one is Europe is going to now be paying for things. It seems like specifically defense. Germany has like got some proposals in the works here to spend like €1 trillion or whatever they are.
Did you guys see that? Graham, did you see that? I would love to show that picture. That picture of the EU with like the face paint thing that they released. It was like rearm Europe. Oh my god!
Yeah,
Jesus.
These people are like rainbow colors, face painted.
No, so it's the EU blue with the stars, and then they've added
the globalist colors.
It's just like the most cringe. Like we're gonna rearm. You're like, all right,
well, okay,
all right, guy.
The point is, it looks like there's actually going to be some spending happening in Europe. In the near future as they rearm. Whether or not that military ends up being effective is another question.
I did see
Macron there will be some money spent.
Yeah, Macron was saying that they're going to need to protect Ukraine without US's help. So that does certainly indicate that France is ready to spend.
Okay, so money printer go burr in Europe. It seems we also have some news out of China, which is it looks like the government has outlined plans to issue up to $179 billion in ultra long-term special treasury bonds and another $69 billion. All right, China going with the auspicious numbers worth of special treasury bonds to be issued to support the banks. So some liquidity. There it is. Rearm Europe. Liquidity ramping up in a few different places.
It's a goatee. Long goatee.
All right. I can't unsee that.
Oh, yeah. Man.
So on the macro front, it does seem like there is some hopium with more fiscal spending in a few different key regions in the world. Any more complex thoughts on that from anyone here?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're having right now in the U.S. is kind of a little bit of contraction, right? Like um, with what Trump's doing, trying
The
to Doge, and then the people getting fired, and the government is quite a big what's it called, employer in the U.S., and then that kind of trickles out into all the different various um, businesses that then support those things. But I still think it looks positive. And there was a really good podcast from, oh God, what is it? I forgot what his new show is called. Anyway, that was very constructive. I highly recommend it on kind of a positive outlook for the remainder of the year. I think you get a lot of macro people talking negatively because I think it's like a more popular thing to do. But it still seems to me like that there's probably more positive things to come. Here we go. Eric Wallerstein on Monetary Matters Network. Highly recommend that this episode. It's really, really good. And this guy, he's kind of nailed the economy, I think, for like the past year or so. So I like I said last week, I think liquidity seems to be, this would be like fits cyclically, like that liquidity is on the rise, and then you have these actual announcements coming out that then kind of support that. So it does seem like we're going to be kind of in a rising cycle here, and probably the last piece of this will be the US, right? So China, Europe starting to pump liquidity, and then when the US finally does, probably a little later this year, maybe Q2, Q3, boom. I think that could be pretty wild.
I think people are the whole 4D chess theory is that Trump is going to be crashing the economy so that they can lower interest rates, and that'll create a new boom. I don't know if I believe that, but that's the 4D chess of theory.
Well, I mean, he's had Besant go out onto talk shows this past week and kind of talk explicitly about that, like of what they're trying to do, of trying to reduce government deficits. And yes, there will be immediate effects, but he's concerned about whatever it is, the long end of the yield curve, and then that would allow them more maneuverability later in the year, something like that, which is, I think, is Fed speak for more liquidity, print dollars.
So pretend that move goes through. What does that mean for the crypto cycle?
Yeah, very liquidity sensitive. So number go up a lot, I'd imagine. I mean, I'm interested to see how this next week is gonna go with. I haven't gotten into the details about this Chinese liquidity. I heard about it yesterday. Haven't had really time to like look into it, but I want to see how much they're putting in. I've heard like some crazy numbers, so I haven't seen any numbers that I trust, but I want to see how much they're putting in, what's the time frame, where are they putting it, and the Europe thing to me is less trustworthy, even from, I mean, especially from the government. They say all kinds of stuff all the time, and then they're very, very slow to do it. So, with them, who knows? But China has a lot more ability to move quickly. So, yeah, you would expect it to be very sensitive, crypto markets, to any kind of real liquidity push in a positive way.
All right, last thing to wrap things up here today, fun topic. We have a tweet here from Mert, who is on his way to Japan and asking what one should do there. Since all of us here have lived or are living in Japan, let's have a quick discussion on that one. David, I noticed in your comment you recommended going to some temple in Kyoto. When I saw that, I threw up a little bit in my mouth because it's just so lame.
No, dude. No.
I thought maybe you were like trolling this guy, like, yeah, go to that temple that's just like overrun with Chinese tourists.
Well, okay, fine. That's fair. No, but this is like one of the most picturesque, or used to be, and it's the right time. If he's coming now, the temple is all these temples close usually at like 5 p.m. Like that's the usual thing. But I think like 2 or 3 times a year they stay open. Some of the temples stay open until like 9 p.m. And the end of March, beginning of April is one of those 2 or 3 times a year where this happens. And it's amazing. So there's a park nearby. They put like those floating little bamboo lanterns into the stream and the lake in the park, and then they light up the road, the walking road only, no cars allowed, walking road that goes from that park all the way to Kiyomizu, up the hill, and they light it up with lanterns and stuff. And then you can go into Kiyomizu. You know, it has that famous veranda, that suicide veranda that looks out over the park below. Each tree is individually lit in the park, so that you get these like kind of mushroom shapes of trees that are all below you. It's absolutely amazing, and you can only see it like 2 or 3 times a year.
Weeb alert.
All right. Any other recommendations?
No, you each have to give one. Can't just be
for
me.
Mert.
I'll give mine. We're talking day trips outside of Tokyo. Might also be kind of touristy, but I feel like first time tourist is good. Going to Hakone, you gotta go to some sort of like onsen type town. Get that whole mountain vibe experience. Go up the, what do you call it, the cable car, see the volcano, eat the black eggs. I feel like it's a very solid, easy trip to do, and then go back in town and relax in the hot spring. That's my recommendation for a first timer.
Corbin, you want to go next, or shall I?
Mine's kind of just onsen based. You know, go hang dong with a bunch of locals at like a really local onsen in the mountains, and yeah, just flex. You know, it's fun.
Yeah, onsens for sure. That's always a good one. My recommendation would be avoid any known place such as Kyoto or basically anywhere, and any major place like that, and just go to any random small town off the beaten track, because the temples there are like just as good in my opinion, but there'll be nobody there. And to me, like, that's what you want when you're like visiting a temple, is just nobody to be there.
Yeah, get away from the crowds, especially if you're coming during the cherry blossom season. It's a shit show. You just got to get out of Tokyo and kind of get into the mountains.
It is terrible now. Yeah. It's the worst it's ever been. Like when we were at Kyoto last year, Corbin, for IVS, I hadn't been there in like 10 years. And it was nauseating. Like I didn't hear any Japanese the whole time I was there. It was crazy.
Well, I think definitely
so yeah, actually
the Japanese yen being in the dumps, you certainly see a lot more whites than you did in previous years. Like there's a lot of folks from America and Europe coming out, where before, you know, dumb guys like me, you just see Asians and you're like, maybe half of them are Chinese, but you know, I can't tell. And you know, yeah. But now you notice, you definitely notice Kyoto for sure. It feels more like a Disneyland. It's weird. Don't go there. It's okay.
Okay, like, yeah. I retract what I said. I think Graham's is the best. On that note, there was a good friend of mine. He did just that. He lives in Japan, and he went to some like random small place, far away from any kind of metropolitan area, and he was like, "Oh, it's like when I first moved here to Japan 10 plus years ago, right? Everybody was speaking Japanese. It was very quiet and nice." It's like, oh, it's great.
That's the way to do it.
You are biased though.
All
You
right.
live on a small island.
Osaka.
And you never see
pretty
people.
pretty dope. I enjoyed Osaka.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Enough of this Japan talk.
Weebs.
Bunch of nerds. Let's wrap it up here. Thanks, guys, for your insights, and thanks everyone for joining another episode of Token Narratives. We'll see you next week. We're out. Adios.